to our other big story of the morning. This was Mike Colombo and Laura Hediger, both live in South City, gathering new information on that deadly officer-involved shooting.
Overnight, we saw protests and police cars damaged during those protests. We've also got new information about the officer and the suspect involved. Our Laura Hediger starts our live team coverage this morning.
And Claire, right off the bat, we need to point out the information that we do know about this suspect so far. Police say he is very well known to them. They also say he lives right in this area. And they also say he was armed with a 9mm handgun. Let's go ahead and show you what it looked like when police started their investigation last night. This happened around 7:30, and according to police, an off-duty city cop was hired to patrol this area. He came upon 3 men acting unusual. They ran from the cop, and eventually that 18-year-old pulled the gun. He fired at the police officer. The cop shot and killed him. Now the shooting is under investigation by several groups.
A couple of weeks ago, I introduced the Force Investigative Unit, which will do an internal review and a criminal analysis of all police officer shootings. When the investigation is complete and during the investigation, with consultation with the Circuit Attorney's Office, we will present that case to them and ask them to review it to make a decision about the officer's actions, if they were appropriate or not in this situation.
Also, during Police Chief Sam Dotson's news conference, he says this happened at a time where tensions were already high. Let's go ahead and send it out to Mike Colombo with more on that part of this story.
Yeah, Laura, I'm live at the corner of Grand and Shaw this morning. The lights from police have been replaced by lightning in the sky, and the roars from the protesters replaced by thunder. Right now, though, police and everyone else waiting to see what happens later on in the day. The big story, though, is what happened just a few hours ago. Take a look at the video that we got overnight. You're going to be able to see protesters here and the unmarked police car that they came into contact with as it drove through a crowd. If you look closely, you can see that car's back window shatter, and after it drives past our cameraman, he got the shot of the back window broken out. Prior to that, we witnessed a man grab an officer's shirt and pull him towards a crowd of people. The officer was able to pull away. The man who grabbed him hid behind a group of women. Take a close look at this. You're going to see an officer get into his vehicle. Then seconds later, a group of demonstrators start kicking the back of that unmarked police SUV. And in another incident, a police officer walked away from a demonstrator who was screaming at him. Chief Dotson telling the crowd their rights will be respected, but they need to respect their own right to protest and do so in a peaceful manner. We can tell you that no one was arrested. That is according to police. None of those demonstrators taken into police custody last night, even despite one moment where there were reports of shots being fired into the crowd, an incident that scattered the crowds that were out here. No injuries reported with that, but obviously a very tense scene here last night, and a story that we will certainly follow throughout the
Overnight, demonstrators ramped up for the second straight night in the Shaw neighborhood of South St. Louis. Protesters blocked streets. Some even burned one of the symbols of our country, the American flag. And there were some arrests. This all in response to the shooting of 18-year-old Vonderrit Myers Jr. at the hands of a police officer on Wednesday night. Team coverage this morning with what happened overnight in the Shaw and the weekend of protests planned in the wake of the events in Ferguson. We want to get you started with Ryan Dean. He is in the Shaw neighborhood. And Ryan, you have some new information from the police chief, right?
Well, that's right. And Kelly, I'm actually in the Tower Grove South neighborhood. It's right next to the Shaw neighborhood. The protest kind of spanned both neighborhoods here just along Grand. And just so you guys know, Grand is open to traffic. It was shut down last night at times, but it's all open now, and there are no protesters here at the scene. Let's show you some video last last night, though. Traffic was shut down in parts, especially at Grand and Shaw. Our crews actually captured video of it being shut down for about 15 minutes. People were having to take a U-turn because protesters were in the street. And then overnight, our overnight photographer was here when police were in riot gear. They were telling people to get back off the street, get on the sidewalk. They were using some force, pushing them back with their shields, and then pepper spray was used to disperse the crowd. One of the more disturbing images, according to Police Chief Sam Dotson, there was a knife thrown at a police officer. It hit him in the shoulder, but the officer was wearing a protective vest, so the officer was not hurt. The chief was asked, you have your peaceful protesters, and then you have your agitators. Take a listen.
There are people here that really are here to let their emotions be heard, and that's why what we do, we protect their rights. But there's certainly a number of people here, and more than you can count on one hand, that are agitators and get the crowd worked up. Certainly they did have their desired effect on the crowd.
And Kelly mentioned it just a short time ago, the American flag being burned. That's, of course, caused lots of reaction on social media right now over that image from last night. We're going to show you more of that at 6:15 in kind of the circumstances surrounding the American flag being burned last night here in the Tower Grove neighborhood, also the Shaw neighborhood. That is the very latest.
We welcome you back for the top story at 7:29 and our coverage of protests overnight. They continued, and there are planned protests for over the weekend.
We begin with Fox 2's Chris Renier in South St. Louis, where overnight protests happened along the popular South Grand area. Chris?
Randy, good morning. This was the second night in a row for protests in this area. We are at Grand and Arsenal. Difficult to see right now, but as soon as these cars start moving, you'll see some broken glass is still sitting out there on Grand from last night's events. This is not far from where 18-year-old Vonderrit Myers was shot and killed by an off-duty St. Louis police officer after authorities say he shot at that cop. This was also the center for the latest round of protests, with people upset over that shooting.
Please disperse, or you will be subject to arrest.
That was the scene here last night about 12:15. St. Louis police officers, some donning their riot gear, tried to disperse the crowd of about 100 to 150 protesters. Police calling it an unlawful assembly because people were in the street. Many left at that point, but some moved over to Tower Grove Park. However, police made them leave the park because it was closed. We saw police using some pepper spray and taking one person away in cuffs before it was all over. That all came after more protests earlier last night. St. Louis Police Chief Sam Dotson telling us the protesters were marching through neighborhoods, doing some property damage there. Then they broke windows on a couple of police cruisers where we are here after surrounding the cars. As police were trying to de-escalate the situation, Dotson says somebody threw a large knife from the back of the crowd. It actually hit an officer in his shoulder, but his vest protected him. Police used pepper spray when Dotson says protesters became aggressive. Rocks and bricks were thrown at officers. American flags were taken and then burned, and even a pharmacy window was broken. Back to you.
All right, what about any arrests, Chris? Was anyone arrested?
Randy, we literally just got an update from police on that issue within the last couple of minutes. They are now saying 8 people were arrested total last night. 1 for marijuana possession, 5 for unlawful assembly, 2 for property damage. We also got an update on injuries. An officer apparently sustained a minor injury when he was hit by a brick during last night's demonstrations.
All right, Chris Renier in South St. Louis.
More on that part of the story. Paul? Yeah, Rayford, police said last night that Myers was no stranger to them, and these court filings that we got today certainly explain why. First, take a look at a couple of pictures. The one on the left of your screen is Mr. Myers in happier times, and the other a mugshot from this summer. Court filings show Myers had been riding in a car with a few other people on June 27th. Police attempted to stop the car. The reasons are not specified in the court report. Then that turned into a high-speed chase, which ended with a crash near St. Louis University Hospital. According to the officer, Myers ignored the officer's calls to stop running and claims Myers then took a concealed pistol, which he had with him, and threw it into a sewer drain. In a television exclusive interview with Fox 2, defense attorney Pete Cohen talks about the Vonderrit Myers he knew and had been hired to defend.
He was a nice enough kid, kind of a quieter kid. He was going to graduate high school at the end of this semester. He was also working a part-time job at, I believe it was called Contico, doing assembly work in addition to going to school. And he was hoping, upon graduation to take up a trade, either maybe construction or something of that nature, but go to a trade school and learn something further to try to better himself.
Now, we checked with the St. Louis Public Schools. According to their records, Myers had been a student at Confluence Academy until this year when he enrolled in the St. Louis Public Schools online virtual learning program, but that he was withdrawn by the district from that program after failing to attend for more than 10 days in September. Myers had been charged with resisting arrest, which is a misdemeanor, and unlawful use of a weapon, which is a felony. The trial was set for November. He planned to plead not guilty. He was under house arrest and was supposed to be wearing an electronic monitoring device on his ankle. Well, that case was being prosecuted by St. Louis Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce, who called a news conference this afternoon to assure the community her investigation would be done independently of the investigation being done by the police department.
It's going to be much more than just reading a police report. It's going to be a robust review of the case. We're going to look at everything, every piece of evidence, every witness statement that they reviewed. We are also free to go out and speak to witnesses ourselves, to collect evidence ourselves, and we will stop at nothing to get to the truth in this case.
Jennifer Joyce said along with her team, she was also going to be joined by an assistant U.S. attorney, something they do from time to time, though not very often. That would be to review whether any federal laws were violated, specifically if there were any civil rights violations in this case. Live in downtown St. Louis, Paul